After 2.5 years, the murder trial of Caylle Anthony is finally going to begin.
What's your emergency? I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month.
I miss that child so much.
Caylle would not hurt Caylle. She wouldn't do that. Shut up! I think it's almost like a hangman's type mentality with some of these people.
You have a young mother charged with murdering her child. And by all accounts, didn't even seem to care or tell anyone that her child was even missing.
We're gonna see her little face again. I pray to God every day that we do.
The breaking developments today, human remains found within walking distance of the Anthony family home.
We have the best in the business reviewing this evidence.
There is no evidence of a homicide here.
The evidence is circumstantial. There's no smoking gun here.
They simply have no physical evidence, and they looked for physical evidence.
When Caylle's remains were found, duct tape was found on her skull.
So Caylle Anthony's DNA was not found on that duct tape?
Correct.
What about Caylle's?
Hers is not found on that duct tape either.
Sheriff's deputies say a cadaver-trained German Shepherd noted a smell of human remains in the trunk of Caylle's white Pontiac.
When I look at the evidence, there's nothing there that says there was a dead body. There's lots of evidence that says that there was a bag of garbage.
The significance of the evidence is in the hands of the jury.
In all my years as a jury consultant, I'm going to say 2 words to you. Caylle Anthony. This is the toughest uphill climb. Does this shed doubt for you on Caylle's culpability of any criminal case I've been involved in? On first-degree murder, who would acquit Caylle Anthony?
It's been 2.5 years since Caylle Anthony was first arrested and charged with murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Caylle, in a criminal case that has become a public obsession.
Here comes Caylle Anthony, handcuffed behind her back.
The evidence is overwhelming.
Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi.
No one else in the world could have done this except Caylle Anthony.
People hate her.
She's been portrayed as an evil person.
Caylle was a 22-year-old single mother. She and her daughter lived with Caylle's parents, George and Cindy, in their Orlando home.
Caylle was a good mom. Caylle put her daughter first.
She put her first. She did.
Put it in your basket. Put the egg in your basket.
The little girl was described by most everyone around her as incredibly cute, happy, and outgoing.
Beautiful.
She's just a beautiful child.
But Caylle disappeared that summer after Caylle took her daughter and left her parents' home. Even more startling is that Caylle waited an entire month before revealing to her family and authorities that her child was missing.
My daughter's been missing for the last 31 days.
Your daughter. What happened with your daughter, Caylle? What did they do with your daughter? Where's your daughter?
A fact that sent the local media into overdrive.
Caylle, where's Caylle?
You know, I think it's very unfair of the media to go and harass people, and that's exactly what the media has done.
You can see the satellite trucks, the media trucks, the live trucks.
Well, what about the odor that you said you smelled?
Hey, Cindy, I just had one quick question for you.
Confronted by a constant barrage of reporters' questions outside her home,
I'm telling you right now, I'm done.
Cindy finally lashed out.
I've asked you guys to respect my privacy. All of you leeches, all of you parasites, all of you maggots out here, okay? That's true, because that's exactly what you guys are. All of you guys.
Fueling the flames, Caylle claimed her nanny a woman no one could find, much less even prove existed, had kidnapped the child. Meanwhile, thousands of volunteers helped in a massive search for Caylle, but were hampered by flooding caused by bad weather.
I pray every night that when I wake up the next morning that it would be just a nightmare. And Caylle would come in the morning and wake me up. But, you know, that prayer can't be answered.
That's because 6 months after Caylle disappeared in December of 2008,
and this will remain a crime scene out here at least through the night, possibly.
Her skeletal remains were discovered in a wooded area not far from her grandparents' home. Authorities say duct tape had been wrapped around her skull, and her body had been stuffed into 2 garbage bags. Her exact cause of death was unknown. Throughout it all, though,
Get off my property.
her parents have stood by her.
You wanted to protect your daughter, didn't you? What kind of grandmother are you, lady?
Even when they became targets of the community themselves for protecting their daughter, who many believe is a killer.
You're protecting a baby killer. Why are you sitting there protecting her? I'm not sitting.
People shouting obscenities.
You out here, bitch!
To stand out in front of our front yard and call us names, throw things at us, spit on us.
Cindy, what are you gonna do, bitch?
I think it's almost like a hangman's type mentality with some of these people.
There's no proof that Caylle had anything to do with it.
Mr. Baez, this would take just 30 seconds.
An opinion strongly shared by Casey's 2 lead defense attorneys.
She's not running from this.
Jose Baez and Caylle Mason have given 48 Hours an inside look at the defense as they prepare for trial. Now just a few weeks away.
It's an unprovable case because it's not true.
If Caylle Anthony is convicted, she could face the death penalty.
This is not a death penalty case, in my opinion, and I've been trying murder cases for 40 years. There is no evidence linking her to anything to do with the death of this child, period.
Can she get a fair trial?
I don't know.
Baez's concern is finding jurors who he feels haven't been swayed by the constant reports of seemingly solid evidence against Caylle Anthony. Media coverage that has been going non-stop for nearly 3 years.
It's very challenging to find people who can be fair and impartial because of the attention that the case has gotten.
So defense attorneys brought in this man, Richard Gabriel, by reputation, one of the best trial consultants in the country, to help them try to pick a favorable jury.
This is the most high-profile case in America.
Jacqueline London, for just joining us. We have been in continuous coverage all day.
The media pressure on this has been almost entirely negative. 80 to 90% of the public believing that she is guilty already.
She's a criminal! She's a criminal! She belongs in jail forever.
You know, we have a presumption of innocence in this country.
Jose Baez tried to get the trial moved out of Orlando, but the judge refused. Instead, when the trial begins May 9th, the lawyers will all travel to another Florida location, chosen by the court, but as yet undisclosed, to pick the jury there.
Then those selected jurors will be brought to Orlando, and they will be sequestered in a hotel here. So they'll be isolated for the entire period of the trial.
The trial is expected to last at least 2 months. 48 Hours commissioned a focus group in Orlando, 12 adults, the same number as on a jury, to see if people there have already made up their minds about this case.
Here is a representative group of what we normally see in an Orlando jury. I'm going to say 2 words to you. Caylle Anthony.
We asked the defense consultant, Richard Gabriel, to conduct the focus group.
How do you have a trial in this case?
You don't. It's already been on trial.
She's been on trial? Did the rest of you feel like we've basically had a trial here?
Mm-hmm. She's basically been tried by the media.
She's been tried by the media. All we need is to bring 12 people in to give their stamp of approval, right. Guilty. Yeah. Let's do it, okay.
Exactly. Unfortunately, that's it. Everybody's already formed their opinion, and for the most part, it's guilty.
It hasn't helped the defense that their client from jail has been openly defiant.
I don't care about the media. I don't care about what people have been saying about me. That doesn't matter. Because I know it's not true, and everyone that knows me knows that it isn't true.
Do you think it's possible that she'll be able to get a fair trial?
No.
No, probably not.
Well, you guys were almost unanimous.
Clearly, what most people think they know about the Caylle Anthony case is probably incorrect.
The biggest case with the least evidence that I've seen ever, anywhere.
Could Caylle have understood what was happening to her as the tape was applied? First one piece, then two, 3 pieces of duct tape to completely cut off the flow of air through her mouth or her nose. It's clear in this case why the death penalty was reinstituted.
For weeks now, lawyers on both sides of the Caylle Anthony case have been in court.
You've got to get the report. That's my objection.
If I can finish, please.
Battling over just what forensic evidence will be allowed at the upcoming trial.
Do you believe the state has a strong case?
I think they have a lot of evidence, but just because there's a lot of evidence doesn't mean the state's got it right.
Larry Kobolinski is a forensic expert and part of an entire forensic team that is consulting with Caylle's defense. They maintain there's a lot of critical evidence prosecutors don't have, especially for a death penalty case, like any incriminating DNA or fingerprints. And authorities have never been able to determine the cause of Caylle's death.
There are many things that might not show up in bones.
Kathy Reichs is a noted forensic anthropologist who also writes crime novels. She is one of the defense experts in the case.
I conducted a full skeletal autopsy of Caylle Anthony's remains and found no evidence of trauma, no evidence that would point to a specific cause or manner of death.
Medical examiner decided this was a homicide, not knowing the cause of death. And here we're saying it could have been an accident. We don't know, yet we're calling it a homicide.
How could this be a death penalty case?
Well, we have to remember this isn't CSI. This is real life.
Prosecutors in the case declined to speak with 48 Hours, but Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, a former prosecutor herself, is convinced of the power of the evidence against Caylle Anthony.
Often we don't have confessions. Often we don't have DNA. But I think when you add the evidence up, piece by piece, and these are very good prosecutors, they're going to establish a timeline that no one else could have murdered little Caylle other than her mother, who was the last person to see her daughter alive.
Perhaps the most significant physical evidence in the case is that duct tape that was found with Caylle's remains.
I believe that is some of the most damaging evidence. And I think that's one of the reasons that they are able to seek the death penalty.
The prosecution cannot...
Prosecutors argue that duct tape is what killed 2-year-old Caylle. In a chilling moment at one hearing,
Caylle was almost 3 when she was killed.
Assistant State Attorney Jeff Ashton detailed how he believes the tape may have been used to suffocate the little girl.
As the killer looked into her face, maybe her killer even saw her eyes as the tape was applied, so that no breath was possible.
But defense attorney Cheney Mason says duct tape did not kill Caylle Anthony.
No evidence of that.
No, that's the figment of imagination of an overzealous prosecutor.
One key reason the defense contends is that none of Caylle's DNA from her skin was on the duct tape, despite its adhesive backing.
I would assume that if it were on her body and there was soft tissue, that there would be DNA on the duct tape.
There often isn't DNA found in cases, especially in such a decomposed state. That's going to be a battle of the experts there.
Prosecutors also theorize Caylle carried her daughter's body around in her car trunk, possibly for a few days, before dumping it in the woods. They cite a strong, terrible odor several people, including Caylle's own parents, noticed coming from the trunk. They also found a hair there similar to these, with what they call banding at the root, which prosecutors say is usually associated with a decomposing body.
The state says then we found a hair.
Lawyer Linda Kenney-Bodden is a former member of Caylle Anthony's defense team and a forensic expert herself.
But the problem is the FBI's done a lot of studies, and they find they can get that kind of decomposition if a hair falls out of a live person.
This is really not proof that a decomposing body was present in the trunk.
And investigators aren't even sure that the hair they found is Caylle's. After conducting new cutting-edge tests, prosecutors say they found high levels of chloroform in the car trunk, which may prove there was decomposition there.
Quite frankly, if this judge lets this high chloroform in as indicative of body decomposition, this case gets reversed. This is such junk science, it's beyond junk.
The defense also points out there was no chloroform found in Caylle's remains. Pam Bondi says that's not surprising.
Chloroform dissipates rather quickly, and her body was completely skeletonized. It would have been highly unlikely for them to have found any traces of chloroform in her bones.
But since chloroform is also a powerful anesthetic, its presence in the trunk may have additional significance for prosecutors.
There may have been enough chloroform in the trunk for them to argue that there were chemicals in the trunk to sedate and kill little Caylle.
As for that terrible odor in the trunk, defense attorney Jose Baez says it's meaningless.
I think the evidence is clear that there was a bag of garbage in the trunk of the car in the summer heat. The car trunk stunk, but there's nothing that is exclusive to a human being that was found in the trunk of that car.
A point underscored by another defense witness, entomologist Dr. Tim Huntington, a bug expert, who disagrees with state claims that the trunk contained evidence of insects that feed on decomposing tissue.
The flies in the trunk are ridiculously common. When I look at the evidence, there's nothing there insect-wise that says there was a dead body. There's lots of evidence that says that there was a bag of garbage.
At Caylle's upcoming murder trial, much of the forensic evidence will be picked over in a war of opposing experts. But for prosecutors, the forensics may not be the strongest part of their case.
Caylle Anthony was not ready to be a mother.
It is Caylle Anthony's behavior that will take center stage at her trial.
It's what she did in the month after little Caylle went missing that, again, is the most compelling evidence of all.
The last known video of Caylle Anthony was taken on June 15, 2008. She had spent the day with her grandmother, Cindy.
Oh, it was amazing. It was a great day.
The following day, Caylle left her house with her mother, Casey. George Anthony expected them home that evening.
We were walking them out to the car that day and telling bye-bye, see you later, and blowing kisses to her.
That day, June 16th, marks the beginning of the troubling month-long period that has become the centerpiece of the case against Caylle Anthony and the cause of the venom directed at her by the public and local media.
The search for Caylle.
It all boils down to her behavior, says Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi.
She is her own worst enemy?
She is her own worst enemy, certainly. We all know when a child goes missing, the first hours are the most critical. She didn't tell anyone her daughter was missing.
At first, Casey's parents had no reason to worry. She told them that she and Caylle were staying with a friend.
She said she had met up with some friends that she hadn't seen for a while, and so I didn't think much of it.
But Caylle herself later admitted that Caylle was gone for the entire month before she reported it. Attorneys Jose Baez and Cheney Mason now face the daunting task of explaining that.
The most telling problem that we recognize is inherent prejudice that has run through this community since July of 2008.
Prejudice?
Yeah, prejudice against this young girl because she didn't act in a fashion that a lot of people think she should have.
How did Caylle behave? These photos have become notorious.
The photographs, I believe, are what's going to get her. The photographs of her out dancing, partying all night long, that is the most compelling evidence of all.
George and Cindy didn't know anything about their daughter's partying. As time passed, her excuses for not coming home kept changing. She was in Jacksonville. She had car problems.
I started really pushing to talk to Caylle. And it seemed like every time that Casey and I were on the phone, she wasn't where she was with Caylle.
While Cindy pined for her grandchild, in reality, her daughter was just 10 miles away. Caylle had moved in with a boyfriend.
She didn't tell her live-in boyfriend her daughter was missing. She didn't tell any members of her family that her daughter was missing.
You know, I would have told every authority figure possible and been banging down doors trying to find her.
This man, Jesse Grund, was an ex-fiancé turned friend. He remembers Caylle consoling him about his troubles, never indicating she had a problem of her own.
When we talked during those 31 days, it was just business as usual. At no time did, hey, I need to tell you something, I lost Caylle, ever come up.
According to police reports, a friend who went clubbing with Caylle called her a happy person who didn't mention Caylle or even the fact that she had a child. At no time, says the friend, did Caylle give away that something bad was going on in her life.
And you know why she was so happy? She was out at bars because she was rid of her child and she could lead a single lifestyle again.
And Caylle always had an explanation for her daughter's absence.
Caylle was on vacation. Caylle was visiting other people. Caylle was at the beach.
And then there was the nanny, with the improbable name, Zanny.
She'd tell me that, you know, Caylle was at the beach with the nanny, or she was somewhere else or being watched by the nanny.
Plenty of people heard about Zanny, but the police could not find one person who had actually met her. Caylle would later claim that Zanny had kidnapped Caylle. She frequented the clubs, she says, because she was conducting her own investigation.
She's trying to get someone to help her.
She told us that she was going to places where she thought that she might run into someone that knew Zanny or where Zanny might be.
So we could find
that she
Caylle.
could find her.
She was conducting her own investigation. Plausible?
Comical, if it wasn't such a tragic event.
In early July 2008, Caylle got a tattoo. Bella Vita, it reads, Italian for beautiful life. She planned to get another, but before she could, her seemingly carefree days came to an end. The car she had used was found abandoned, and on July 15th, her parents went to retrieve it. Cindy scolded Caylle over the phone.
So I said, Case, I said, you're not in Jacksonville. She said she'd call me back.
She tracked Caylle down and confronted her face to face.
I asked her, I said, where's Caylle? And she said she was at Zanny's house. And I said, well, let's go get her.
They drove around until it became clear that Caylle was simply not going to take her to see Caylle. They went home and Cindy called 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Cindy reported a possible missing child.
We'll have a deputy out to you as soon as one's available, okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Only then, with police on the way, did Caylle finally admit that Caylle had been missing for a month.
So what do you mean? She's been taken? Why didn't you tell me?
Cindy called 911 again.
My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store.
She was the very first person to mention that awful odor in the trunk.
There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car.
I said whatever it would take to get the police there quicker.
Can she retract that statement that it smelled like a dead body in that trunk?
Well, she can attempt to retract it, but they have the 911 tape.
And they have that month of Casey's conduct, which her attorneys insist will be explained in court.
She waited a month before reporting her daughter missing.
And I think there's a very compelling reason for that. And
What
it
is
will
the
certainly
reason
come
for
out.
that?
There's a very compelling reason for that, and that will come out at trial.
For more than 2 years, while Caylle Anthony has been locked up in jail awaiting trial, she has been vilified.
She's been portrayed as guilty. She's been put into that position from day one.
But Caylle is hardly alone. Her parents, Cindy and George, have been sharply criticized for their behavior, both before and after their granddaughter went missing.
Initially, the country believed that the Anthonys were the all-American family, but quickly learned they were anything but.
Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, who has followed the case closely from the beginning, says understanding the entire Anthony family may be the key to the whole case.
I think it's tragic. I think there's a family dynamic that's hard for all of us to understand that was going on within the Anthony family.
What exactly was going on? Bondi says these jailhouse conversations are telling.
Maybe we've all been too domineering.
The parents seemed to be very deferential to her.
Maybe we didn't let you be the best
Dad,
mom.
it's
you are a
nobody's
great
fault.
mom.
It's nobody's fault.
But all that's going to change. I'm going to listen more.
She was running the show, even in jail.
We just need all the cooperation we can get, sweetheart.
I've given you guys everything that I have and some.
Since Casey's arrest, Cindy has desperately tried to help her daughter. During this 2008 jailhouse visit, before Cayle's body had been found, she pressed Caylle for details about the mysterious nanny she called Zanny.
Listen, I'm in front of the cameras all the time. What message do you want me to give to Zanny?
That she needs to return Caylle.
Caylle Anthony is a habitual liar. She sent the police looking for a nanny that didn't exist for weeks and weeks and weeks.
I can't fathom that this is someone that Caylle would all of a sudden, make up.
Investigators never found anything to substantiate Cayle's claim that Caylle was abducted by a nanny. But now, nearly 3 years later, and for the first time, one of Caylle Anthony's former defense attorneys, Linda Kenny Bodden, concedes to 48 hours there never was a nanny.
So she lied when she
lied.
said that the nanny kidnapped the
Sure.
baby.
I think everyone knows that that was a lie. Her actions have been her own worst enemy.
What does that say about her state of mind?
It says that she's extremely manipulative. So she's just leading police on a wild goose chase the entire time her daughter is missing.
According to Bondi, Cayle's dishonesty came as no surprise to her family and friends.
She was a habitual liar by all her friends and family's accounts. It's documented that she was taking money from her grandmother that was used to help care for her grandfather.
Because of who she is, because of her upbringing, because of how she's been treated, she lies. But being a liar does not make you a murderer.
Do you think Caylle Anthony was a good mother?
Yes, I think Caylle Anthony was a very good mother.
Linda, you're not telling me that Caylle Anthony was Mother of the Year.
I'm not saying that she's Mother of the Year. I don't think any of us are Mother of the Year. But I'm saying she's not the demon that people have made her out to be.
Still, one of the reasons why Caylle faces not only a murder charge, but the death penalty, is what investigators found on the Anthony's family home computer. Incriminating searches she allegedly made months before Caylle went missing, with terms including neck-breaking, household weapons, shovel, and how to make chloroform.
These were all internet searches done on the computer that Caylle Anthony used 3 months before that little girl went missing. So if that doesn't give you premeditation, I don't know what does.
They don't know if Caylle was even home, much less on the computer.
So these searches are insignificant?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you can't say who ran the searches, how are the searches significant? That could have been done by any family member.
Investigators have interviewed many of Casey's friends and family members to understand what was happening inside her home. And one of those witnesses, ex-fiancé Jesse Grunn, says he knows exactly what was going on.
This is somebody who lived a life of no consequences under that roof.
In 2005, Jesse says Casey desperately wanted to leave home because she deeply resented her mother for trying to play mom to Caylle, then just an infant.
We know from all of Casey's friends that they had a very tumultuous relationship.
It wasn't Casey's child, it was our child. She belonged to all of us. I don't think that there was ever resentment there.
But investigators were told that Cindy actually thought Casey was irresponsible and called her an unfit mother. At one point, sources say, she even threatened to seek custody of her granddaughter.
I never said she was an unfit mother. I never said that. She was my best friend.
And most critical of all, in June 2008, on the night before Casey left with her daughter for good, Jesse Grunn claims he heard that Casey and Cindy had a huge fight.
Cindy confronted Casey about Casey stealing money from Cindy's mother, and a shouting match ensued, which then had Cindy wrapping her hands around Casey's neck and choking her.
It's not true. Mr. Grunn has come up with a lot of statements that are not true.
Anyone and everyone was just willing to come out and say whatever, all these bad things about her.
Attorney Jose Baez agrees that to understand his client, one must first understand her parents, which is why he has taken a closer look at the family dynamic.
I understand that you reportedly spent a couple $1,000s investigating the Anthonys.
We've left no stone unturned. We're investigating this case. And to do that, you have to look inside the house. They're in the center of the storm. For everyone to understand Casey, you have to also understand her family.
In fact, recent Florida media reports suggest Casey's defense team may be planning to take their investigation one step further by blaming Cayle's death on her grandfather.
There has been speculation on local television that you may try to pin this murder case on George Anthony.
There's speculation about everything. I will not engage in that. I will lay it all out in the courtroom. That's where this case is going to be tried.
Is it possible that George Anthony killed this little girl?
Well, I guess we're going to have to wait and see what the evidence shows.
In response to those reports, George Anthony released a statement through his attorney denying any involvement in his granddaughter's death. It said George Anthony had nothing to do with the death of Caylle Marie Anthony. Neither the defense team nor the state of Florida have maintained that he is at fault in any way. Despite the rumors,
Next, tornado terror, part of the same system dumping heavy rain on our area. We have team coverage. Oscar-winning actor Nicolas Cage and his arrest in the Big Easy. The news is next.
Their children. And that's what you think of when you think of a mother and a beautiful child. She did not want this little girl. I think she wanted a life of partying, and this little girl got in the way of all that.
But will signs of a dysfunctional family and a decadent lifestyle really be enough to convict Casey Anthony of murder?
So here's the question for all of you.
Our focus group will decide for themselves.
Who here would vote to acquit Casey Anthony of first-degree murder? Please stand up.
With Casey Anthony's trial about to begin, her attorney, Caylle Mason, makes a prediction, but not about the outcome.
I think it probably will be the most expensive case in the history of Orlando or Orange County. The process of bringing a jury to town, sequestering them for 2 months or whatever, plus the investigation, the total cost is in the millions.
Is that reason enough to pressure both sides into reaching a plea deal?
No prosecutor in this country would let budgetary constraints influence the decision as to whether to prosecute a murder case. You never know what a jury's going to do. And right now, Caylle Anthony has everything to lose because she's facing the death penalty.
Caylle Anthony has entered a plea of not guilty. We expect the trial to go on May 9th.
The plan is for the court and lawyers to travel to an as yet undisclosed location in the state to pick jurors who everyone is hoping know far less about the case than the people of Orlando, where Caylle and her parents live and where Cayle's remains were found.
The judge has to find people who have the ability to basically erase from their minds everything they've heard and seen about this case and discussed.
The defense's trial consultant, Richard Gabriel, says that's not going to be easy.
He has to find out about all the people's feelings about the death penalty and whether they're able to sit on a case like this and be put in a very intense pressure cooker for a 2-month period of time.
Would you read it into the records?
The judge, as of now, is giving us 5 days. And that's not enough time.
May the attorneys approach the bench.
For both sides, the stakes couldn't be any higher.
Probably the worst thing that an attorney has to deal with in any high-profile case is jury selection. You actually win or lose your case in jury selection, depending on whether you can pick a jury that will listen to you.
This court will be in recess till 9
It's going to be very difficult for her to come out of this case with anything but a guilty verdict on something.
Our focus group received a limited presentation of evidence likely to be argued by both sides of the case, including some of the forensic evidence and physical evidence like that duct tape. They listened to Cindy's 911 calls and heard about Caylle's reported behavior. And after roughly 4.5 hours, the participants came to a shocking conclusion.
If the only charge was first-degree murder, who here, based on everything you've heard today, plus whatever else you know about this case, would vote to acquit Caylle Anthony of first-degree murder? Please stand up.
Unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. With reluctance, I understand. Okay, great.
With reluctance because while participants opposed convicting Caylle Anthony of first-degree murder, they were also signaling an equally strong reluctance to let her walk free.
What do you think happened here?
I think it was accidental.
I think it was accidental.
Accidental how, though?
Maybe
what
she
happened?
Fell,
or, you know, with the little girl's dead and she's trying to cover it up.
Maybe she was afraid that she would be accused of child abuse.
I don't think she intended to kill her.
She obviously has mental issues. She has lied. She deserves to be punished.
Another critically important question. Did they feel Caylle Anthony is still criminally responsible for her daughter's death? And if so, would they be willing to convict her of a lesser charge?
Please stand. How many of you would vote to convict on an involuntary manslaughter charge? Nearly all of you.
9 of the 12 participants,
thank you very much,
voted to convict her.
That makes me hopeful that maybe the people of Orlando are not being led around as much as I thought by the local news media.
That's also the fondest hope of Cindy and George Anthony, while still mourning the loss of their granddaughter, Caylle.
We'll release the balloons up to our loved ones. Happy birthday, Caylle Marie. We love you guys.
They must face the difficult reality that they may lose their daughter, Caylle, as well.
I have faith. I have a lot of faith that Caylle will be home with us soon.